It has often been remarked by those who knew him well that Sherlock Holmes possessed a peculiar restlessness whenever his mind was not engaged in active pursuit of a problem. John H. Watson, his companion, and at that time still his lodger at Baker Street, was never long in perceiving these periods of languor, and I often feared that they might lure him into those darker habits which I had done my utmost to discourage. Yet I must confess, whenever a fresh case arrived at our sitting room door, the sudden animation that overtook him was akin to a flame taking to dry tinder. The spring of '82 had brought with it a freshness in the London air, but the soot of the city and the bustle of cabs along Baker Street were as unchanged as ever. It was upon one such morning, when the air was crisp and a shaft of sunlight found its way through our dusty blinds, that Holmes sat in his dressing gown, pipe between his lips, eyes half closed, and fingers steepled before him. Tones, you seem unusually quiet today. No letters, no telegrams.
Quite so, Watson. The post has been barren, and the Strand has not thought it fit to trouble me with a trifle. We live in a singularly peaceful interlude.
Peaceful for London, perhaps, but I fear it does not suit you.
Your diagnosis, as ever, is astute, though not original. I am starved, Watson, starved for a morsel of intelligence, a crumb of that which challenges the reason.
He struck a match with an impatient gesture, relit the pipe, and for a time the only sound was the faint gurgle of smoke passing through the briar. I confess, my friend's moods ever fascinated me, for even in idleness his mind seemed to hover at the edge of some unseen problem, hungry to be engaged. And yet, Holmes, there must be cases enough in the police courts and alleys of Whitechapel.
Doubtless. But are there cases, Watson? A drunken quarrel, a pickpocket, a broken window, mere symptoms of the common disease of society. No, I yearn for the unusual, the inexplicable, that which pricks the intellect as a burr pricks the skin.
It was in this very moment, while he spoke thus, that our maid Mrs. Hudson entered, bearing upon a tray a folded note of some urgency. Holmes extended his hand even before she had crossed the threshold.
Aha! The world stirs at last. Thank you, Mrs. Hudson.
He tore open the missive, his eyes dancing across the page, while I leaned forward with involuntary anticipation.
Listen to this, Watson, to Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Sir, I am in great distress of mind, and must beg the favour of your immediate counsel. I shall call upon you within the half hour. Yours faithfully, Grant Munro.
Grant Munro? The name is unfamiliar to me, so that seems familiar to me.
And to me, which, my dear fellow, is the most promising detail of all. We shall see shortly whether he is a fool, a rogue, or, most intriguingly, a client worthy of attention.
True to his word, the visitor arrived within 30 minutes, announced by the sound of hurried steps upon the stair. A tall, broad-shouldered man of the working class, yet with the air of respectability, entered our chamber. His face was flushed with both exertion and emotion.
Gentlemen, I crave pardon for my abrupt intrusion. Mr. Holmes, I presume?
The very same. And this is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson. Pray, be seated. Mr. Bandisker, Grant Munro, and relieve your mind by stating the cause of your anxiety.
The man grasped his hat between strong hands and spoke with a candor that bespoke both honesty and a citation.
Mr. Holmes, I scarce know how to put words to my trouble. It concerns my wife, Effie, and a matter that has placed a great shadow over our household. I love her with all my soul, yet she has acted in ways that fill me with both fear and suspicion.
Holmes, I hope this is not some domestic quarrel of trivial kind.
Hush, Watson. Even the humblest quarrel may mask a deeper discord. Proceed, Mr. Munro.
I shall be as plain as I can. Effie and I have been married for some years now. She is a widow, her first husband having perished of yellow fever in America. She returned to England, and by fortune we met. We lived happily at Norbury in a small villa, and I believed our life to be one of trust.
Here the man's voice faltered, and he glanced from Holmes to myself, as though ashamed of what he must disclose.
3 days past, a cottage near ours, long empty, was suddenly occupied by some stranger. My wife, upon perceiving this, grew strangely agitated. I observed her slip out alone against her usual custom, and returned in a most distracted state. When pressed, she evaded my questions. Later I saw her again approach the cottage, but she forbade me sternly to follow or inquire further.
That is curious indeed. And you have no knowledge of who resides there?
None, sir. And the blinds are drawn, and the figure within I glimpse but once, and that most fleetingly, a face at the window so ghastly pale and strange that I scarce can describe it. It's
A face? Pray, what manner of face?
It seemed, though the light was dim, of unnatural hue, almost a dreadful yellow, not diseased or disguised.
Holmes leaned forward, his keen eyes alight with interest, while I felt a chill creep upon me at the description.
Most remarkable. And your wife has offered no explanation?
None. She begged me with tears not to ask, yet her secrecy tortures me. Am I not her husband? Do I not deserve her trust?
That is precisely the point we must resolve. Tell me, Mr. Munro, do you detect any signs of affection between your wife and the occupant of this cottage?
No, Holmes, none such, but secrecy where there should be openness breeds the most tormenting doubts.
Indeed it does.
And you observed the yellow face but once?
Only once, yet it haunts me.
A yellow face in a shuttered cottage, and a wife's inexplicable secrecy. Yes, Watson, I think our mourning has been redeemed. Mr. Munro, we shall come to Norbury with you and examine this matter at the root.
The client's relief was evident in the loosening of his shoulders and the gratitude in his eyes. He rose, thanking Holmes profusely, while my friend merely waved a hand with his habitual indifference to praise.
You cannot know, Mr. Holmes, what solace this gives me. If my suspicions prove unfounded, none will be more joyous than I. But if there be some deception, I had rather know the truth, however bitter.
Truth, sir, is ever preferable to tormenting shadows. We shall accompany you by the afternoon train. Till then, I must make certain observations and arrange my little arsenal of methods.
With that, Grant Munro departed, and, leaving behind the faint scent of rustic tobacco and the air of a man burdened by unseen chains, I turned to Holmes, eager for his verdict. Well, Holmes, what do you make of it?
Make of it. My dear Watson, I make only that which is before me. A wife of American origin, a sudden neighbor, and a mysterious yellow face. The conclusion? Too soon. We require data.
Yet surely you have some hypothesis?
Several, each mutually destructive. I never guess where evidence may be procured. Remember, Watson, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts.
You are ever the lecturer, Holmes.
And you, happily, the patient pupil. Now, shall we prepare for a little excursion to Norbury?
Thus began an adventure that was destined to remain vividly impressed upon my memory, not for its violence or its peril, but for the lesson it carried, one that humbled even the great intellect of Sherlock Holmes. The afternoon sun had grown faint behind a veil of mist as we boarded the train for Norbury. Tom Roy. The carriages rattled with the steady rhythm of iron wheels on rails, and I, seated opposite Holmes, could not help but study his features. He leaned back, eyes half closed, yet his fingers twitched lightly upon his knee, a sure sign that the machinery of his mind was in motion. You seem absorbed, Holmes. Are you turning over the problem of the yellow face?
Absorbed, yes, though not exclusively with the matter at hand. Each case, Watson, is a prism through which human nature refracts. In this instance, the prism is colored by secrecy, by jealousy, by fear. What remains is to determine the angle of refraction.
I confess, I find myself greatly perplexed. The description of a face of yellow hue suggests illness, perhaps even contagion. Could it be that the occupant of this cottage is stricken, and Mrs. A's Munro conceals the fact from her husband?
An interesting supposition. Yet if it were illness, why the secrecy? Why the concealment of the very existence of the sufferer? Human beings, Watson, are more often ashamed of what ought to inspire pity than they are of what ought to inspire blame.
He smiled faintly, then opened his eyes, which gleamed with sudden alertness.
Besides, did you note our client's choice of words? He spoke not of pallor, nor of sickliness, but of a hue unnatural, almost artificial. That, to me, suggests artifice rather than affliction.
Then you suspect a disguise?
I suspect everything, Watson. That is the safest position, until facts compel me to dismiss one suspicion or another.
Our journey was brief, and soon we found ourselves alighting at a modest country station. Grant Munro, who had travelled with us, led the way along a winding lane bordered by hedgerows. The air was fresher than the fog of London, and the evening birdsong accompanied our steps.
Gentlemen, it is but a short walk further. There lies our villa, and yonder, across the field, you may glimpse the cottage that so troubles me.
Following his gesture, I observed a small, neat dwelling of white plaster, its garden unkempt, its blinds drawn tight. A sense of mystery seemed to cling about it, heightened by the stillness that surrounded it. A most solitary aspect indeed.
Observe, Watson, the shutters. They are new, yet ill-fitted. And the chimney. Do you see smoke?
None at all.
Precisely. Yet habitation there must be, else what purpose in drawing the blinds?
We reached the Munro home, a pleasant villa with ivy climbing its walls, and were ushered into a parlour where Mrs. Effie Munro awaited us. She was a woman of graceful bearing, with dark eyes that betrayed a depth of feeling. At our entrance she started, then recovered with dignity.
Grant, who are these gentlemen?
Effie, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. I have brought them, for I can no longer endure this cloud of secrecy between us.
You had no right, Grant. I begged you to trust me.
Madam, forgive the intrusion. Believe me when I say we are not here to wound your confidence, but to dispel a mystery that oppresses both yourself and your husband.
You cannot help us. Indeed, you cannot.
Surely, Mrs. Munro, concealment is the heavier burden. If your cause be innocent, why not speak freely?
Because I gave my word.
Effie, by all that is holy, I am your husband. What is this oath that binds you tighter than your vow to me?
The woman buried her face in her hands, shaken by emotion. For a long moment, none spoke. Then Holmes's voice, calm yet insistent, filled the silence.
Mrs. Munro, there are truths which, left untold, may destroy the very thing they are meant to protect. I urge you, speak.
No, Mr. Holmes, I cannot. Do not press me further.
Holmes studied her with that penetrating gaze, which seemed to read the very fibers of the soul. Then he inclined his head slightly, as though accepting defeat.
Oh, very well. Then we must act without your assistance.
What do you mean?
Merely that we shall conduct our own inquiry. If the occupant of yonder cottage is innocent, then no harm will come. If guilty, the truth must be revealed.
Mrs. Munro uttered a low cry, but Holmes had already turned to Grant Munro.
Tonight we shall make our observation. Watson, you will accompany me, of course?
With pleasure. Thus it was resolved. That evening, under the cover of twilight, we made our way to the mysterious cottage. The path was narrow, the hedges thick with early blossoms, and the silence profound save for the rustle of leaves. Holmes moved with the quiet precision of a cat, while I followed as best I could.
Note, Watson, the ground by the door. Few footprints, chiefly a woman's. Yet the earth is soft enough to retain them.
You mean Mrs. Munro has indeed visited here?
Undoubtedly. And observe, there, a man's heavier tread, but less frequent. Curious.
Crept nearer, and Holmes suddenly halted, raising his hand.
Look, Watson, at the window.
My gaze followed his, and there, framed by the curtain, I saw it, a face, ghastly in the lamplight, of such unnatural yellow hue that I involuntarily recoiled. Features were indistinct, yet the effect was one of horror, like some grotesque mask. Good heavens,
Steady, Watson. This is no apparition, but a puzzle of flesh and artifice.
Face shook. Even as he spoke, the face vanished, the curtain falling into place once more. Holmes's lips curved in a thin smile.
The game is afoot, Sempos.
What do you propose?
Tomorrow, in daylight, we shall confront this mystery openly. For tonight, we withdraw.
And so we returned to the Munro villa, my mind a whirl of conjectures. Could it be a criminal in hiding, a sufferer of some dreadful disease, or, as Holmes hinted, a deliberate disguise? Holmes, I cannot rest for thinking of that ghastly visage.
Nor should you. Restlessness is the prelude to discovery. Yet remember, Watson, appearances deceive, and the simplest explanation is often the true one.
With those enigmatic words, he bade me good night. But I lay long awake, haunted by the memory of that yellow face at the window. Morning broke over Norbury with a pale light filtering through drifting clouds. The hedgerows glittered faintly with dew, and the song of a lark pierced the stillness. I awoke early, my mind still unsettled by the ghastly image we had glimpsed in the cottage window the night before. Though my medical training rendered me no stranger to deformity or disease, the unnatural hue of that face and its sudden disappearance had disturbed me deeply. Holmes, however, greeted the day with his customary calm, sipping strong coffee at the breakfast table, as though we were merely preparing for a stroll. His serenity in the face of enigma was at once infuriating and admirable. Holmes, do you truly believe what we saw was no more than a mask?
My dear Watson, if nature produces such complexions, then she has concealed them from both physician and painter. No, it was a deliberate artifice. The question is, why?
Then you believe some person seeks concealment?
Concealment or deception, one may shade into the other. That is what we must discover today.
Grant Munro entered at that moment, his face haggard with sleeplessness.
Gentlemen, I scarce closed my eyes all night. Effie avoids my gaze, and when I pressed her, she wept, but would give no answer. Mr. Holmes, I beg you, end this torment.
Courage, sir. We shall resolve it before another night has passed.
Thus fortified, we set forth toward the cottage. The lane was quiet, a milk cart rumbling in the distance, the fields stretching green beneath the soft sky. Cottage itself stood as before, shutters drawn, door closed, silent as a tomb.
Now, Watson, here is where we apply our scalpel to the case. First, the exterior.
Holmes circled the dwelling with feline grace, his keen eyes missing nothing. He paused to examine the lock of the door, the frame of the windows, the ground at the rear where weeds grew high.
Note, Watson, no signs of force. Entry is regular, not surreptitious. Lame, and here, ashes in the garden soil, some refuse burnt recently.
Paper?
Just so, something discarded in haste, but no fragment remains to tell us what.
Straightened and rapped smartly on the door. No answer. He rapped again, louder, still silence.
Grant will not answer. They shun all neighbors.
Then we must force the matter.
Holmes, surely we cannot break in?
A locked door, Watson, is but an invitation to ingenuity. Mr. Munro, do you, as a property holder, object to our entry?
Object. By heaven, no. I insist upon it.
Without further ado, Holmes produced a small instrument from his pocket, one of those singular tools he seemed always to carry. With deft precision, he manipulated the lock. Within moments, the latch yielded, and the door swung inward with a creak. The interior was dim, the shutters admitting only thin slices of light. His dust motes swirled in the beam from Holmes's lantern. Air was close, with a faint smell of burning paper and something else, perhaps chemicals or grease paint. Holmes, look! Against the far wall stood a chair. On it rested a mask, grotesque, hideous, its surface painted an unnatural yellow. The sight of it in daylight was scarcely less disturbing than in the twilight window. A mask indeed.
Just as I suspected.
But then where is the wearer?
Even as he spoke, a sound came from the inner chamber, a low cry, followed by the patter of feet. A moment later, the door opened, and into the room stepped a small figure, timid yet with wide, wondering eyes. It was a child. Incisions, Masabinos incisions, company station, a little girl, no more than 8 years old, her features delicate, her hair dark, and her complexion of a warm, dusky hue, unmistakably of African descent. She gazed at us in alarm, then with shy curiosity.
A child?
Holmes,
A child, yes, and the mystery begins to resolve.
At that instant, footsteps hurried behind us. Mrs. Blixpater, Mrs. de Fegdizet. Effie Munro burst into the room, her face pained with fear.
No, you should not be here. Please, please do not harm her.
Effie, what is the meaning of this? Who is this child?
She is my daughter by my first marriage.
A silence fell upon us, broken only by Effie's sobs and the child's quiet breathing. Grant Munro stood rigid, his eyes fixed upon the little girl as though struck to stone.
Mrs. Munro, speak freely now. Concealment has done its harm. Better truth, however painful.
I, when I married you, Grant, I feared you would never accept her. My first husband was American, her father, a man of color. When he died of yellow fever, I returned to England. I thought, foolishly, that to tell you of my child would lose me your love.
So you placed her here, hidden in secrecy.
Yes, I rented the cottage and I brought her over from America with her nurse. The mask. I thought it might frighten away curious neighbors who saw her at the window. This, I wanted to protect her. Oh, Grant, forgive me.
Grant Munro's face worked with powerful emotion. He stepped forward slowly, his broad hands trembling.
Effie, you thought so little of my love, that I would cast you off because your child is not of my blood.
I feared the world's cruelty would be yours as well.
By heaven, woman, I am not so base. Your child is mine now, as surely as if you were born of my own body.
With that, he bent and lifted the little girl in his arms. She clung to him timidly, then with growing confidence. Effie sank to her knees, overcome by relief.
Grant? Whom?
A happy resolution, Watson. One might almost regret that the case offered so little of deduction.
On the contrary, Holmes, I find it rich in lessons, though perhaps of the heart rather than the mind.
Perhaps, yet even the greatest intellect may err, and today mine has been shown its limits.
For indeed, throughout our investigation, Holmes had suspected artifice, crime, or deception, when in truth the matter was simply one of human weakness, fear of prejudice, the desire to shield a loved one from censure. It was a case unlike any other, and it left upon us both an impression not easily effaced. We departed from the cottage, leaving the reunited family to their newfound peace. Holmes was silent during our walk back to the station, his brows knitted in thought. At last, as the train bore us toward London, he spoke.
Watson, if ever I am tempted to boast of my powers, remind me of Norbury.
"Pray do so, Holmes."
For once my calculations led me astray. It is well, perhaps, that I am occasionally humbled. It keeps the vanity in check.
I could not but agree, though in my heart I felt that Holmes's very humility in admitting error was the truest measure of his greatness. Thus ended the strange affair of the yellow face, a case remarkable not for crime or violence, but for the quiet triumph of love over fear. Our return journey to London was marked by a curious quiet. Ordinarily, when a case had reached its conclusion, Holmes would launch into a full dissection of every clue, every hypothesis, and every false lead. He delighted in turning back the veil for me, showing how each thread of deduction had been woven into his web of logic. Yet on this occasion, he sat with his chin resting upon his hand, his eyes fixed on the passing fields beyond the carriage window. For my part, I was content to let silence reign, and the case of the yellow face had been unlike any other in my experience, and I was still digesting the revelations. The sight of the child, the courage of Mrs. Munro in confessing at last, and the generosity of her husband's acceptance, all these had left me deeply moved. At length, Holmes stirred, and his voice, quiet but firm, broke the stillness.
Watson, I have erred.
"My dear Holmes, you cannot reproach yourself so harshly. No man could have divined such a secret.
And yet I prided myself on divining the undivinable. That is the snare of my profession, Watson. Success breeds conceit. Conceit blinds one to the possibility of error.
You have solved 100 cases where no other man could have seen the truth. One instance of failure only proves you human."
Ah, but consider the chain of reasoning by which I allowed myself to be led astray. Shall I lay it out for you?
Relax, please do. I should be glad to learn where deduction faltered.
Very well. Let us begin at the outset. We had before us a wife who, in her husband's eyes, had always borne herself with candor and devotion. Suddenly, she became secretive, evasive, and anxious when a cottage near their home was occupied. She visited this cottage repeatedly, forbidding her husband to follow. What is the natural inference?
That she was concealing some relationship with the occupant.
Just so. and the very intensity of her secrecy seemed to confirm the inference. When Munro glimpsed a face at the window, grotesquely yellow, the situation appeared doubly suspicious. My mind, accustomed to weigh probabilities, leaned at once toward the hypothesis of a lover or confederate concealed there.
And yet, the mask.
Precisely. When we beheld the face ourselves, I was convinced it must be artificial. But I leapt too hastily to a conclusion as to the wearer. I imagined some guilty party seeking concealment. I forgot that artifice may serve other purposes besides crime, that it may, for instance, shield innocence.
A subtle distinction indeed.
Subtle but vital. Consider, Watson, how the very excess of secrecy blinded me. I reasoned thus: secrecy equals guilt. And yet, in truth, secrecy often equals fear. Fear of judgment, fear of cruelty, fear of the world's prejudice.
Which, alas, is often harsher than any code of law.
Exactly. Had I but paused to reckon with human sentiment instead of cold probability, I might have spared myself an error.
But in fact, he tapped his long fingers against the window pane, his expression thoughtful.
Do you recall, Watson, how I cautioned you against forming theories before one has data?
Indeed, you have often scolded me on that point.
Well, in Norbury, I fell into my own trap. The data were insufficient, yet I spun a theory and forced the facts to fit. Observe how even the most vigilant may stumble when pride whispers in the ear.
Then you would call this case a defeat?
Not wholly. To be wrong is not disgraceful. To persist in wrong reasoning, that is disgrace. Here, the truth revealed itself before greater harm was done. Moreover, our client found happiness where he feared ruin. One might almost call it a victory, though not of mine.
He spoke with quiet irony, yet I could see that the lesson had bitten deep. Holmes, may I confess something?
Pray do. Him.
I found the outcome uplifting. In so many of our adventures, jealousy ends in violence, secrecy in murder, and suspicion in ruin. Here, for once, love triumphed over fear. It seems to me that is as valuable a conclusion as any.
You are the moralist, Watson, while I am but the logician. Yet even I must admit the result was refreshing. It is not often that our profession permits us to leave happiness in our wake.
At this, he lapsed once more into silence. But I, reflecting upon his words, perceived that Holmes's greatest power was not merely his intellect, but his capacity for humility when intellect failed. In that, he was a rarer man than in all his triumphs of deduction. When we reached Baker Street that evening, Mrs. Burzix, Mrs. Bowes, even I Cotley Agates, Hudson greeted us with her customary good humor, and the familiar surroundings of our sitting room enfolded us like an old cloak. Holmes flung himself into his chair, stretched out his long legs, and drew deep upon his pipe. You look more content than you did this morning.
Content, perhaps, but chastened. I told you, Watson, if ever I am tempted to boast, remind me of Norbury.
Rest assured, Holmes, I shall, though I suspect it will not dampen your brilliance for long.
Brilliance is a dangerous word, my dear fellow. Better to be thought useful than brilliant. The one invites gratitude, the other vanity.
He closed his eyes then, and I let him rest. But long after, as I sat by the fire, I could not help turning the case over in my mind. The little girl's shy eyes, the mother's anguish, the husband's generosity. It seemed to me a parable of our age, when prejudice could wound deeper than any knife, and where courage was needed not only on the battlefield, but in the quiet heart of the home. And thus ended our reflection upon the strange adventure of the yellow face, though the memory of it remained with us both for many a day. Norbo. Long after the excitement of the case had passed, I found myself returning in thought to Norbury, to the little cottage, and to the child whose very existence had seemed at first so fearsome, so threatening, and yet was nothing more than an innocent soul hidden by a mother's anxiety. It is the peculiar privilege of those who dwell with Sherlock Holmes to reflect upon the human heart as well as the mind, and in this instance, the lesson was singularly profound. Holmes, of course, had already retired to his chemical experiments, papers, and instruments. He paced his sitting room, pipe in hand, eyes bright with thought. Yet the atmosphere of triumph, often so sharp and sterile in our adventures, was tempered here by an almost tender satisfaction. Yeah, Holmes, do you ever tire of triumphs of intellect?
Triumphs, Watson. They are less than half the story. Triumph is easy when the puzzle is purely mechanical. It is far harder to gauge the consequences of human feeling, to see how hope, fear, or prejudice may influence the conduct of even the most rational mind.
In this case, the consequences were not ruinous, only painful.
Painful, yes, and instructive. A lesson I seldom need, but one that reminds even the keenest intellect that humanity may confound reason at every turn.
I remember sitting by the fire as Holmes, in a rare moment of discourse, shared his reflections as though he wished me to absorb them fully.
Watson, consider the error I made. I assumed guilt where there was none. I inferred crime where there was only fear. My entire chain of deduction, so usually unerring, failed because I neglected the simplest element, the tenderness of a mother's heart.
And yet you solved the case, Holmes, even if your initial deductions were flawed.
True, but it is not the solution alone that defines a detective's wisdom, Watson, but the comprehension of the forces which shape human behavior. A man may guess correctly, yet remain blind to the reasons. One must not only see the pattern, but also perceive the sentiment behind it.
I was struck, as I often was, by the profound humility that could inhabit such a mind. Holmes, brilliant beyond measure, capable of unraveling the most tangled of lies, was humbled here by the simplicity of human fear and devotion. It seems, Holmes, that this case was more a study of the heart than the intellect.
Precisely, Watson. And it is a lesson to remember. Even the sharpest deduction is impotent if it ignores compassion, if it disregards the moral and emotional currents that run beneath every act.
Dwelling, as I reflected further, and I living life a veli vilio, I could not help but consider the broader implications for Victorian society. Prejudice, class, and the rigidity of custom had created a climate in which a mother feared to speak the truth of her child's heritage, even to a husband who loved her. And yet, when faced with the reality, when the truth was revealed openly, generosity and understanding prevailed. Holmes, ever attentive, noted my contemplation.
You think, Watson, that such cases are rare. Perhaps so. But mark my words, the world is full of fear masquerading as guilt and sorrow hidden behind the mask of propriety. The detective's task is not only to uncover fact, but to interpret motive. On the subtler the motive, the more illuminating the discovery.
You speak as though this case has changed you.
Not changed, Watson. Refined. One does not discard logic, one complements it with insight. Consider the child in the yellow mask. Reason alone could never have revealed her. Only a careful observation of human sentiment led to the truth.
And so, in the quietude of our Baker Street rooms, I found myself pondering the lesson of Norbury. Holmes, brilliant and unyielding, had been humbled by humanity. And I, ever the student of both mind and heart, recognize that the greatest cases are those which teach us not merely to solve a puzzle, but to understand the living, breathing complexity of those we seek to aid. Holmes, I confess, this case leaves me with a sense of wonder.
As it should, Watson. Wonder is the precursor to wisdom. Never lose it.
The fire crackled, casting warm light upon the walls lined with books, papers, and instruments. Holmes's pipe smoked gently in the evening hush. The city beyond, with its smoke and clamor, seemed a distant world. In that room, one could almost forget the shadows of crime and see only the subtle triumphs of compassion, courage, and love. And thus ended the adventure of the yellow face. No, not with blood or violence, but with understanding, reconciliation, and a lesson that even Sherlock Holmes, master of deduction, lord of reason, acknowledged the human heart is as complex, as unpredictable, and as mysterious as any puzzle his brilliant mind may encounter. I, John Watson, remained by his side, ever learning, ever observing, and ever reminded that the greatest mysteries are often those of kindness and fear, love and trust, and that even in Victorian London, the quiet triumphs of humanity may shine brightest of all.
Watson, make a note of this, if you will. Wisdom lies not only in seeing what is hidden, but in understanding why it is hidden.
We settle back into the rhythm of our lives at Baker Street, carrying with us the memory of the yellow face, a story not of horror or crime, but of hearts illuminated by honesty, courage, and the enduring triumph of empathy.